Hello, and welcome back to A Better World. This is your host, Mitchell J. Rabin, and we're very glad you're joining us again today. Today we're going to have another very interesting show. We have invited back to be with us Lama Surya, who is the author of this book, Awakening the Buddhist Heart, and actually several others, all on the subject of his experience of Buddhism and what the Buddhist way can be for all of us, as well as the interconnectedness of Buddhism with other ways of thought, religious, spiritual, that have been on this planet actually for millennia. Lama Surya Das is a very interesting man. He was actually raised in the New York area in the Jewish faith and went to India and Nepal at a certain age and spent some 22 years there, going to monastery after monastery, studying Buddhism and other ways of being free. And came back to this country and has been leading workshops, teaching seminars, retreats, and writing books, and is now well known across the country. Surya, great to have you.
Thank you, Mitchell.
Good
It's nice
see
to
you
be
again.
back in a
Good.
better world.
In a better world. You see, since you were here, you helped to create it. So since I've seen you last, you've been busy writing and teaching, and why don't you tell us a little bit about how this book differs from the work that you've done before this?
Sure. This book is about awakening the Buddhist heart, so it's more heart-centered. It's about how we can use all of our relationships as a way of awakening, our relationships to each other, our relationships to lovers and loved ones, but also our relationships to our family, friends, colleagues, our relationships to our body and our health, our relationship to nature and to all animals, and our relationship to that which is greater than any of us, but in each of us. So it's about using relationships as a vehicle for awakening, as a vehicle for a sacred life. And I think that's very important for us today, since we're not hermits, recluses, monks, or nuns, most of us. In my previous books, I've written about Buddhism for the West, how we can practice the path of enlightenment, the timeless path taught by Buddha. And in this book, I'm taking up specifically the subject of relationships and how we can make every moment spiritually meaningful, and every contact, every relationship, every encounter a moment of awakening, of enlightenment, of heart opening, rather than of endarkenment, of not to mention violence or unhealthy relations.
Interesting, because at this time of all time, Surya, as we were talking a bit earlier, with the kind of activities that have been taking place with 9/11, the destruction of the World Trade Center, has created an air in people's minds and fear in their hearts. So the willingness to negotiate, so to speak, and be present with what people are feeling is more difficult and challenging than ever.
Well,
what would you say about that?
Well,
what can people do?
I'm glad you brought that up. We're here downtown in the island of Manhattan, not so far from Ground Zero.
1 mile.
And I certainly feel that. And I
Yes.
visited there for the first time a few weeks ago, and it was very moving, very sobering, very mind-stopping, kind of like a pilgrimage. I felt like I was at a holy place.
Yes.
And very mind-stopping and feelingful. But I think that there's a lot we could say about that. You asked me what I've been doing lately, and as you know, for 10 or 15 years I've been teaching, writing, leading retreats, organizing conferences and different forms of spiritual activism, of enlightenment activism.
Yes.
Specifically in the last 2 months I've been speaking a lot about this, as people often ask me and people like myself to speak at interfaith gatherings and also in the media. And I've published some articles and columns about this. I think that this is a very anxiety-full time. We feel very insecure. There's a lot of fear in the air. There's a certain amount of jingoism and chauvinism and nationalism. We're going to have to deal with that.
Yes.
Obviously, we have to find these criminals that perpetrated these heinous atrocities.
Yeah.
And we have to put a stop to this. But how we do that and how we proceed toward a better world in which those things will no longer continue is a little bit murky, I think, to all of us. Now, as a Buddhist, as a spiritual seeker, as a spiritual being, I'm a firm believer, Mitchell, in non-violence, non-harming. But radical non-violence is a very difficult position to keep and maintain when threatened. If somebody threatens you or your wife or your child in the street, you can't just stand by and let them be harmed. So we have to find the middle ground or middle way, and also a bigger systemic movement towards helping us get over this intense animosity